Hey guys, David here and welcome to another Dark Art Guitars video. Today we're gonna build the very first Alchemist neck-through guitar. I've built quite a few Alchemist guitars, but so far I've never done a neck-through. My excuse for that was just that I couldn't fit it on my previous CNC, but now, as you've probably seen on this channel, I built a new CNC almost a year ago by this point. So it is high time to actually build a neck-through guitar now that it easily fits on the machine. So I start off here by milling up some wood. This will become the neck. And I'm using some nice Swiss flamed maple here, which will make up the majority. And then I'm adding in a couple of wenge pieces just as accent pieces. This maple is very nicely quarter sawn, so I really don't need the wenge for strength, and I will actually keep the grain orientation of the maple the same, so that, like the flame will be continuous throughout the neck, and the wenge is just there as visual accents. Now, another reason why I haven't built the neck-through guitar so far is that it just is a whole lot more complicated in terms of figuring out in which order you need to do which steps, so that you don't build yourself into a corner. With a standard guitar where you have either a screw-on neck, or I usually do it where I glue it in, so a set neck, you can build the neck and the body separately until basically the finishing stages, which is a lot more easier to handle, and you don't really need to worry about things colliding. However, with a neck-through guitar, it is just one linear progression where both the body and the neck get built at the same time. So here you can see I finished up the neck blank, and it's on the CNC for the first time of many times. And I want to have kind of the taper of the neck fall throughout the body instead of just having a square neck through section on the body. So this is what I'm cutting here, kind of the taper that will later become the neck as well. I'm only cutting where I will glue on the body so that later when I cut the neck part, this will line up perfectly. Here, if I'm off by like half a millimeter or so, this will not really be noticeable in the end. So that's kind of how I'm planning these operations. To be able to locate it back on the CNC, I have these two locating dowels that align with my CNC bed as well, and they allow me to get it back on in a mostly repeatable fashion. The wings that I will be using are some ash, and actually I only really noticed this when I started working on it, but I had these two pieces left over from other builds, and they kind of perfectly matched up. But I later realized that one of them is European ash and the other one is American swamp ash. And while they are very similar, you definitely feel it while working that the swamp ash is a lot lighter and softer as well, whereas the European ash is quite a bit denser. The patternation is also slightly different, but I decided to not kind of do over once I realized, but continue with it, as I think it looks perfectly fine, and we're still within ash, so the sonic characteristics should be similar. The pieces I had were super thick, so before kind of flattening them on the CNC or anything else, I cut them down on the bandsaw, just kind of resawing them a bit. To get the connection nice between the neck and these body wings, I'm doing some proper hand woodworking with this big plane here, and just trying to get it 90 degrees and nice and flat, going back and forth with this little square and also straight edge to make sure that there's no hump in it. Now, I'm not the best with a plane, and it could probably also be sharpened. So after planing it, I'm going back in with a leveling beam and some 120 sandpaper on it, just to make sure that it is perfect before gluing. The top for this guitar will be made out of this beautiful piece of Bastogne walnut. I had this laying around for a while, and I thought it was just the perfect piece for this build. So I'm getting ready to glue it up here, just using my little jointing jig here to get a nice straight, perfect 90-degree face here. And this walnut also just planes beautifully and produces these nice little curls. Now at this point, all of this is also still intended as a stock build. I'm just kind of making up the specs as I go with materials I have laying around and what I think will make for a beautiful guitar. I later posted on Instagram with my progress and asked if anybody was interested, and it did not take long for it to sell before it was even completed. So unfortunately, this guitar is no longer for sale. My top gluing jig here just allows me to apply a bit of pressure from the side with these wedges. It really doesn't need a whole lot because it is such a thin section. You don't really need all that much clamping pressure. And then the piece that I'm clamping over top here is to keep them perfectly aligned to each other. I have a little bit of wiggle room. The top is still thicker than what it needs to be in the end, but I still want to get it as close as at all possible. So I'm just clamping it flat this way. When gluing up these body wings here, that's the first step where I can really need to pay attention that it is nicely aligned, because I want to have a flat bottom here. I will be kind of machining part of it again, but if it doesn't line up perfectly at the bottom with the neck, that will just mean it doesn't sit nicely on the CNC, and I will have a whole host of problems. There are ways that I could have worked around it and kind of used maybe my drum sander afterwards to flatten it, but I had already thicknessed the neck, and so I just make sure that it is nicely aligned once again here with some clamps and a piece of wood underneath. And then after it's dried, I'm just using a card scraper here to get all the glue squeeze out and make sure that the transition is nice and smooth. To prepare the body for the top, it is once again back on the CNC, and I'm cutting away the part of the neck where the top is going to sit, and then also cutting in some of the recesses already that will be hidden. Like there's a little bit of chambering in the bottom part, which is the European ash, just to make it lighter, as well as the cable channels. I also like to bend the arm bevel over top so that the top kind of doesn't get cut off. So this is also what I'm preparing here. While I usually can get away by just gluing on the top rough cut, and then the neck pocket is cut afterwards, because the neck is part of the body, I have to kind of use the CNC here to get my top cut out already fairly close. Now the overall outline here is still oversized. I will cut that later, but the neck pocket is already perfectly defined so that it locates on it, and I can glue it on. Now before I can glue it on the body, I do need to prepare it. Both the body needs to be kind of sanded smooth so that it is ready for the top to be glued on. There are a bit of machining marks, of course, as is natural from the CNC. It rarely ever produces anything finished. And I'm also gluing in the carbon fiber reinforcement into the neck here. Once again, this maple is very nice and stiff, so it really is not necessary probably, but I just add these to all of my guitars. They're 6mm square carbon fiber rods. Get them from a composite supplier, and they just add a little bit of insurance policy that the neck is nice and stable and doesn't move too much over time. Just aids with tuning stability and peace of mind. By using some acetone to wipe off the excess epoxy, I can later use wood glue and it will stick nicely. I then use my drum sander to get the top to the final thickness, making sure that it is just perfect. I usually go for around 5mm, which is also what I did here. The fit for the neck needed a little bit of finessing by hand, but that is actually perfect. I'd rather have a bit undersized and need to sand it by hand and get a very nice and tight fit. To get the arm bevel, it is not enough to just kind of clamp it in place. The wood is way too stiff for that. So I'm using this bending iron and wetting down the wood and trying to bend it. Now, usually I use poplar or maple for the guitar tops, and those two woods bend very easily. It doesn't take a lot of force and heat to get them to match the shape perfectly. But this Bastogne walnut was just a bore. It took a lot of force, a lot of heat, and I still only kind of sort of got it close. I then, once I had a bit of a bend in it, clamped it down, and as you can hear, unfortunately, I still had a little bit of a crack. This was gut-wrenching when I heard it, but I still finished clamping it in place so that it can kind of dry and cool down in this shape. And I just kind of filled in the tiny crack. It's almost not visible, just with some sawdust and epoxy here, sanding it flush, and then in the finished result, you probably would have not been able to tell until I just told you now that there is a little bit of a fix. In guitar building, sometimes things happen, and the only thing you can do is fix it and move on. Just starting over is not always an option. Like, I don't have another one of these walnut pieces, and I cannot go to the local hardware store and get one either. Back on the CNC, we are for what feels like gazillionth time now cutting out the outline of the guitar, as well as all the pockets, like for the pickups and the bridge and everything like that. Now, unfortunately, with the dust shoe, you really can't see much going on in the CNC, so I'm just speeding through these montages. But I'm roughing out all of it with the bigger tools first, and then using a ball and mill to kind of get all the radii and things pre-prepared to just save a bit on sanding. To machine the bottom of it, I need to flip it over, and usually that is no problem, as I have this flat top that I can easily fixture down to the table. But here I have a neck piece which is higher up than the body piece. So I'm adding this kind of MDF spacer here that just is an old template, and it happened to be the right thickness. So I'm using the masking tape and super glue trick here to hold the template to the body, and as well as the guitar to my CNC. Once again aligning it with these dowels that I have put in place. This is sturdy enough, while definitely not the most secure setup, but it's the easiest thing I could come up with in the moment without making a proper fixture for it. And I'm kind of hesitant usually to build fixtures, as while I build a lot of similar guitars, they all end up being slightly different from each other. So while I might build a fixture for this, chances are next time it's going to be a different scale length, or something else is going to be different, and I'd have to completely remake the fixture. So I prefer these kind of easier, smaller hacks rather than making a full nice fixture out of some pristine stock. Cutting the bottom outline here is actually quite satisfying. I only usually cut the body and the neck separately, of course, but here I'm actually cutting out the entire guitar essentially in one go, which is kind of fun to watch, and definitely looks cool. You can also see here how the neck is nicely lining up with the body wings, and there is basically no misalignment here. Always very happy when things line up and it actually works out as I intended. The neck at this point is also still very, very chunky, and a lot of material needs to be removed, which is another kind of downside of neck through guitars, that there's just a lot more waste for the neck. I'm essentially cutting away like half the neck, and while I could try to cut it off with a bandsaw, the leftover piece that I have is kind of an awkward size where it's too big to throw away and too small to actually do something with it. So instead of trying to take it off and do that, I'm just milling it all away with the CNC, and that is just easier than trying to relocate everything again, and well, a bit wasteful, but nothing we can do about it. Then on the back, a bunch more 3D surfacing, both for the neck and all the body contours. I will still go back and refine all of the curves and shapes, but this will give me a good start. With that, the body is mostly done, and we can start moving on to the fretboard. The first step for that is cutting out all of the different inlay pieces. The inlay for this guitar will be made out of aluminum. So here I'm starting out by cutting out my logo. I'm using a 2mm end mill here to cut out the rough shape. That's just a lot easier to cut with a larger end mill. I'm using compressed air here to cool it down a bit and blow away the chips, as well as periodically just adding a drop of oil. Well, this aluminum here was sold to me as 6061. I'm pretty sure it's a different alloy, and it's kind of gummy to machine. To get the actually sharp corners of my logo a bit sharper, I'm going back in here with a 0.6mm end mill and an adaptive rest machining strategy to sharpen up the corners a bit. For the position markers, I will be using circles, and for that I'm just cutting up some 6mm aluminum tube. This is very easy way to make a nice circle inlays, provided that you can find some tube with an even wall thickness, which turned out to be surprisingly difficult, as most tube kind of ended up being uneven all around and not as nice. The fretboard here is this very unique piece of marbled ebony. Now, it's just regular ebony, but has some like lighter colors that kind of got in splotchy places here. I really like this piece when I saw it, so I just had to buy it, and I think it will go very well with the top as well. Starting off by facing it close to the final thickness, and then cutting out the perimeter shape before cutting the little inlay pockets. Once again, it's really hard to see anything going on with the dust shoe, so we're just moving on to actually installing these inlays. And I probably should have made the pockets a little bit larger, because these required quite a bit of persuasion to get them in. But on the positive side, this means that the final inlay is very tight and there's basically no gap. Not that you could really tell, since I'm using black CA glue here, which blends in very nicely with the wood, and the entire thing just looks nice and seamless. For radiusing the fretboard, I'm using an 1/8 inch bullnose end mill, meaning it has kind of a flat bottom but rounded corners, and this allows me to get a very nice and smooth finish, and I can do quite a bit larger step overs than I could do with a ball end mill without getting too many ridges. I also decided to not use the dust tree here, since there's not as much dust created and you can finally see some actual cutting action. And you can also see just how easy CNC is, and look at this beautiful tear out that we get here on this ebony. I will fix this later with some CA glue, just kind of gluing it back in place and fixing any other spots. And for the fret slots, I'm starting by scoring them with this V-bit that just kind of creates a bit of a chamfer and guides the very fragile fret slotting tool here. And this is actually really speed cutting here with this 0.58 millimeter fret slotting end mill. It's a 3 flute tool, and you do want to feed it fast enough. With the 30,000 RPM spindle I have here from Spinergy, this looks scary fast, but I got through the job no problem without breaking the tool. To align the fretboard while gluing it down, I'm drilling 2 little holes here through the fret slots and using some 1 millimeter nails, hammering them into the neck just as deep as I drilled it, not really hammering them any further, and then cutting off the head, just leaving maybe like a 1 millimeter sticking out. This is enough to locate the fretboard to the exact position, but not enough to interfere with anything. And before forgetting, I'm also drilling the truss rod access hole here, just kind of trying to aim at the right place. I've gotten decently good at it with some practice, but you can always go up 1 drill size if you don't end up hitting it perfectly. Quickly checking with an Allen key, and we're good to go. Gluing this fretboard on is not that easy, just because the guitar is already assembled instead of having just the neck. So I'm using the vacuum clamping system that I've been using for the last couple of guitars, which works really nice and easy if it's just the neck, and it also doesn't look as ridiculous. But here I had to put the entire guitar into the vacuum bag just to be able to clamp the neck. But in the end, that worked out just fine as well, and the neck got properly clamped without any gaps anywhere. Ideally, at this point, I would have also put in the side dots into the guitar fretboard. However, I did not do that, and I actually did not realize that I forgot to do that until basically the assembly step, so I had to get a bit creative with that. Once again, another advantage to a set neck, where I can finish the neck and then do the dot inlays on the side. And with the guitar essentially fully completed, it is time for sanding. And in guitar building is 10% actual woodworking and the rest is sanding. And I will spare you most of it, so however much sanding I'm showing you here, multiply that by 10 or maybe 20 or 30 actually, and that's roughly how much sanding there was in proportion to everything else I've shown you. This Festool Rotex 90 sander is absolutely amazing for guitar building. It is small enough that you can get in quite a lot of the little curves which a larger 5 or 6 inch sander could not possibly reach. And while it is kind of expensive, it has easily paid itself already in time saved just over the course of the last couple of guitar builds that I've done with it. And while it is a great time saver, nothing gets around hand sanding, and especially all the corners and roundovers and hard to reach spots all need to be touched up by hand, and in many different steps, going up the grids, back down if I see some more imperfections. It's a large back and forth progress. Then for the fretting, once again, the first step, as with everything here, is sanding. More precisely, kind of level sanding the fretboard. I've tried to make sure that everything is nice and flat. The fretboard is the right even thickness throughout, the neck is as flat as possible, and it's glued on without distortions as much as possible. However, it never ends up perfectly flat, so I need to go back and flatten everything before installing the frets. And that's also why I can't really install the frets before gluing on the fretboard, just because that wouldn't allow me to flatten the fretboard, and I would have to do everything on the frets, which would mean just a tremendous amount of fret work. I go back and forth between the leveling beam to get it nice and straight, as well as this radiusing block to make sure that the 16-inch radius that I chose here is nice and even all throughout. And while on the CNC, adding scallops is not much extra work, when it comes to preparing the fretboard and sanding it, they sure add up a lot. I will easily spend 2 hours just sanding all of these fillets up the grids and making sure that they look nice. I usually like to go up to around 800 or 1000 grit for my fretboards to have them nice and silky smooth, and that also kind of polishes up the aluminum pieces. At this point, I also fix any small tear out that I wasn't able to glue back on, so I'm just using some black CA glue, building it up and kind of drying it with the accelerator. And since there's a lot of black spots in this ebony anyhow, it will be absolutely impossible to see the black CA glue versus the black ebony. That is one of the great things about ebony. It's really easy to fix with black CA glue. Now, the actual threading I did not get any footage of for some reason, but next is kind of getting all the frets end to the right length so that they're nice and flush. If you were doing nickel silver frets, this is also easy to do, and if you're doing the neck by itself, this is easy to do. I can just go on the belt sander and kind of do most of it there, but here, of course, a lot of it I cannot actually reach on the belt sander, so there's a lot of using this hand file, which allows me to first get them at a 90-degree angle, and then here what I'm doing is kind of beveling them, and a lot of hand sanding of that. It took quite a while because the file doesn't take up that much, and stainless steel is really hard to file. After that, it's back to the leveling beam, getting the frets all perfectly level. Now, they should be very close already because we leveled the fretboard before, but they might not be all installed quite the same thickness, and there's also some slight tolerances from the manufacturing process for the frets. Now I'm using Jescar stainless steel frets here, which are very high quality, so it's mainly my installation and not the frets themselves. The rest of the process is more or less standard procedure, kind of rounding over the ends with a crowning file. And then I'm using this diamond file here from StewMac, the Z file, to re-establish the crown where I kind of sanded off a little flat spot at the top of the fret. Then the last step is getting them all nice and shiny again. So I'm starting at 400 grit after the diamond file and kind of switching up, going perpendicular and along the frets, moving up to 600 grit and sometimes 800 as well before going to a two-step polish. I'm using these kind of cloth polishing wheels chucked up in my drill, and they make pretty good work of this fret polishing, just using metal polishing paste here, nothing special. And this actually goes quite quick and the results are great. You just absolutely have to tape up your fretboard for this, otherwise you will get the fretboard completely caked with the polishing compound. And then time to peel off the tape. That's always a very satisfying reveal when you have this kind of dirty, ugly thing and take off the tape and see the first part of the guitar essentially finished. Using some mineral spirits to wipe off any excess polishing paste that got in the way, as well as any glue residue from the tape. And the mineral spirits just kind of don't react with the wood at all and dry off quickly, as well as are a great solvent for any residue. And 3 guesses what the next step is. If you guess anything else but sanding, then you're wrong. You haven't learned anything I just taught you. Next step, of course, is sanding. Much more sanding. Now we're getting to the kind of detail, fine sanding steps. The shape is there. It's already roughly there. Now I'm sanding at 180 grit and then 240 grit as well. Just getting all the last roundovers perfectly right so that they're nice and even all around and everything looks nice. There's no coarse sanding scratches anymore. This is really where a high quality guitar gets made. If you skimp on these steps, you will later regret it when you apply the finish, and all of a sudden all of your little sanding mistakes are much more apparent than they were before. I also do a quick water pop here, which is very satisfying as you see kind of the grain revealed. And that just makes sure that all of the fibers from the wood grain that kind of were pushed down get raised up so that I can go back and sand them off before applying the first steps of the finish. The top of this guitar will be high gloss, whereas the body will be open pore kind of satin. So I'm masking off the transition area between the top and the body here, so I can pore fill just on the top and kind of leave the nice deep pores from the ash open. I really like doing open pore ash bodies. They just have a lot of character and it kind of gives some texture to the whole thing. And here now comes the money shot, applying the epoxy grain filler. And as fun and satisfying as that just was, as well as this nice tape hole, 3 guesses what the next step is? Yes, you've correctly learned. The next step, of course, is sanding, kind of sanding the grain filler flat again and making sure that the transition between where applied grain filler and where there's no grain filler is nice and smooth and there is no ridge buildup there. But before we can get to the finish, I need to cut the electronics cover here. I'm doing this out of 2mm aluminum sheet. This allows me to connect a jack directly to the cover and it's a kind of sturdy attachment point. I definitely did not steal that from Strandberg. Well, good designs are supposed to be stolen. Then just bending over the place where the jack gets attached and the vise here. And behind it you can already see the tent setup for my finishing setup. I don't have space for a proper spray booth, so this kind of grow tent is what I use instead with a nice exhaust fan and filter. And then the actual spray finishing, I completely forgot to record. So here's me spray finishing a different guitar. You might have seen this on the channel, and if you haven't already, make sure to go check out that video after you finish this one. Really cool guitar. Then with the first base coat of the finish applied, I paint all of the cavities here. For the pickups, it's mostly just to make it look clean, having the black background there. It also adds a bit of shielding, but it's not as necessary as in the electronics cavity, where of course we do absolutely want to have it shielded. The reason I apply this now instead of before or later is just now it's easier to apply because it doesn't soak into the wood anymore. And I can also very easily kind of sand off any excess that got over it because I already have kind of some finish underneath. And the reason why I don't do it in the very end is that this way the next step when I finish, spray more finish, it will kind of protect it as this shielding paint is quite fragile and will easily kind of scratch off and look not as nice anymore. Then after some more spray finishing, I didn't film, it is time to level sand the top. This is a careful act of kind of using most of the Rotex sander here as well as some of it by hand, using 800 grit, and I want to make sure that I get out all of the imperfections. It's nice and level without sanding through at any one spot. It's really difficult because you have not really any idea how much further can you sand. You just kind of have to trust based on your experience of how much finish you applied and how much you've sanded in this spot, but you really need to watch out, especially on the corners, that you don't accidentally sand too much in one spot and sand through. Because once you sand through, there's no other option than to spray another coat and kind of restart your sanding. For the sanding, I go up through the grids 800, then 1200 or 1500, whatever I have in hand, until I finish off with a 2000 grit sponge sander on the Rotex. And then I move on to the polishing of the top here, using the StuMag system with these foam attachments for your drill. This is a really easy way without having to have a buffing wheel of kind of getting a pretty good buff and fairly quick buff as well compared to doing it completely by hand. I'm starting with the fine medium here, and I don't do the medium as I've already sanded up to 2000 grit, and I find that the kind of medium polishing paste is just a bit too coarse and doesn't work that well. So I start with the fine and go over everything. I usually find a bunch more scratches where I have to go back and use either the 2000 grit ideally, or sometimes I have to go all the way back to 800 grit and do some more sanding to get all the scratches out. Going back to polishing to see the new scratches back and forth, until I'm finally happy with what I have. And after I went over everything and all the scratches are out, I can then move on to the swirl remover. That's their finest polishing paste, and go over everything again and give it the final nice and pristine shine. I definitely don't enjoy high gloss finishes. I personally am not a huge fan of how they feel. Well, I do like how they look, but I'm definitely not a fan of making them. It's just a lot of stress of accidentally kind of sanding through or burning through. Even in the polishing step, you can still, if you stay in one spot too long, you can burn through it and you have to start all over. This actually happened to me on this guitar, where in the polishing step, I burned through in one spot and then had to go all the way back, respray it, resand it, go up the grits again and then repolish it. It's a huge pain, but I guess that only can be fixed with experience. But what is undeniable is that for a top like this, high gloss will just give you the most depth, the most pristine color and luster. So I'm more than happy then to do it to kind of get the best end result. At this point also the client had bought the guitar, so it was the client's choice to go here with high gloss, as I was originally going to do a satin top since it was going to be a stock build, and I'm not quite that much of a masochist that I choose the hardest finish for a stock build. Since the back will be satin, right now it's just still gloss, just not fully polished. I'm now masking off the top to be able to spray a nice satin coat over the back and as well as the neck. Doing it in this order is the easiest for me, as I can take as many attempts as I need for the top and then just in the very end add a very thin coat over the back. And I usually spray all my base layers for the satin guitars in gloss anyhow, as the gloss paint can build a lot higher and thicker layers, so I only need to spray 2 or 3 layers instead of 10 or 20 with satin lacquer. So here I actually managed to record the spraying, so you can see that I just dusted with a very light coat everywhere that will be satin. And the product I'm using here is from MIPS. The high gloss I'm using is Crop, and that's just brands I can get here locally. If you live somewhere else, you will probably have different brands. You might be able to see that when it goes on fresh, it actually looks somewhat glossy, but then once it dries, it turns more of a satin matte color. Finally done with the lacquering, and I could take that big spray booth back down. While it is great to be able to temporarily set up a spray booth in your workshop, it does mean that I cannot access about half of my drawers, and half of my workshop is taken up by this big tent. So I'm always very eager to be done with the spraying and be able to take the spray booth back down so I can access all of the tools and everything that was hidden to me before. Before removing the tape off of the fretboard, I kind of go around with a scalpel blade and break the seal of where the lacquer kind of built up a bit. This just makes sure that when I rip it off, there's no kind of tear out or big chunks of the finish on the side. After, I also go back in with the X-Acto knife here to kind of break the edge of the fretboard, as well as remove any of the finish that kind of made its way in between the tape. The final step before assembly then is to apply the oil to the fretboard, which makes it come alive as well and protects it as well. This should last for quite a while, and it was also very easy to touch up and will make sure that your fretboard stays nice and pristine. And always remember that after you've applied oil to your fretboard, let it soak in for a couple minutes maybe, but then wipe off all of the excess. You don't want to just leave the buildup on there, as when it kind of dries or cures, it will just become gummy and not very nice. For the assembly, I like to use threaded inserts to mount my pickups. I also use foams instead of springs for the direct mount here. So I'm installing some M3 threaded inserts here. And for the pickups, I usually have to drill them out, as most of them come threaded to be used kind of with a pickup surround, but I'm not using pickup surrounds here, so I drill those out for 3mm, which works quite easily. And then use these threaded inserts in the body. I use the same ones as well for the electronics cover. That way it's just a bit nicer if you have to take the electronics cover off and back on. It's not wood screws that will wear out over time, but it's threaded inserts that, well, you can thread in and out as many times as you like. Installing the bridge here, the grounding wire, I should have definitely drilled that hole before I did all of the finishing. This was very scary, having to drill into this pristine glossy top here. But luckily it worked out fine without any issues, and I could get the grounding wire installed. And this just goes underneath all of the individual saddles here for this technology for musicians bridge that I'm using for this guitar. In the background here, you can also see another guitar just peeking through. If you want to see more about that, you can go follow me on Instagram. I only post a very small fraction of all of my builds here on YouTube, as making these long-form guitar building videos take a lot of time, as well as filming a guitar. It also makes all of the different processes take longer. So only a couple guitars get this full treatment, and for the rest, you'll have to go check out my Instagram or my website in case you don't have Instagram. And in case you see this guitar coming together here now and you're just absolutely in love with how it looks, don't be too sad that it is not available. While this guitar is sold already, you can of course go reach out to me, and I'm happy to build you something similar. Now, it will never be exactly the same thing, as I'm not building factory guitars. Every single one is going to be unique, but that I think also adds to the charm and means that you can customize just about every little detail that you like. The pickups for this build are Fishman Fluence Moderns. Somehow lately I've been kind of on a Fishman trend. Just about everybody that contacted me wanted Fishman pickups. So I have like 5 guitars in a row with Fishman pickups, and I decided on Fishman pickups for this, what was originally a stock build, way before all of these orders came in. So it's kind of funny how that worked out. Main reason why I'm going with the Moderns here instead of the Tosin Dabasi signature ones, which I usually prefer, is because the Moderns are available with these chrome tops, which will match the rest of the chrome hardware beautifully. But of course, the differences are not that big between the Moderns and the Tosin Dabasi ones. The headpieces here are also from Technology for Musicians, and they nicely screw down onto the string, which means that you can have the ball end by the bridge, and then you can thread them through the headstock and screw them down there, and it holds nice and tight, and it's quite easy to string up and change any strings if you ever need to. For the nut, lately I've started using Ridgelite as a material for it instead of just using Graphtec, and I actually had great success with that. Now, using Ridgelite for fretboards I've done for quite a while and is very common, but material also works very nice for nuts, and actually cuts and kind of behaves very similarly to Graphtec, and is, well, a fraction of the price. And because the blocks are a bit bigger, I can very easily just chuck them up in the CNC like this, and kind of get the rough shape of the nut already done, get it to the right width, and get all the strings spacing started. But of course I still have to go in by hand, get it to the perfect thickness for a tight fit, and cutting in all of the nut slots with the nut slotting files for the exact string gauge that this build will be using. This is another advantage of going with a custom build. I always ask the client what tuning they will be using and discuss which string gauge will be the right fit for them based on how they like a lighter or a tighter feel. And that allows me to cut the nut just fitting perfectly to the gauge that will be actually used. And this means I can have very nice low action and the strings are held in nice and firm. There's no play and everything just feels perfect. The strings for this build here is a set of 1056s, so fairly heavy gauge as the client likes to really chuck down on the strings and get some heavy fast riffs in. My personal preference usually is quite a bit lighter. I'm more of a 942 kind of guy, but to each their own, and it's always nice to be able to set it up exactly to what it will be used for. I'm also adding shoulder S-locks strap buttons here, which just is very high quality strap lock system. That means that when this guitar is hopefully played on stage or just at home with a strap, it is nice and secure and will not go anywhere. The wiring for Fishman can get a bit messy just because there is these 3 voices that you need to switch with the 2 push-pull knobs and for the 2 pickups, but I've kind of gotten in a rhythm of making everything nice and neat, and I think the wiring turned out quite clean and everything actually worked first try. Now, first time installed Fishmans, that definitely was not the case. And with that, this guitar is completed, and here you can see some beauty shots. What do you guys think? Is this a guitar that you would want? Leave a comment down below what you like about it, what you don't like, what would you do different. I am absolutely in love with it, and I'm kind of sad that it is going away already, but that's just how it goes. The best guitars are always the quickest to leave. So with that, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Go check out my links down in the description. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.